As a country, we eliminated saturated fat in the 60s. And since then, our rates of heart disease have only increased. So maybe it's time to rethink our opinion on saturated fat.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 106, and my guest is Lindsea Willon. Lindsea is a nutritional therapy practitioner in California, and she was also a speaker at our recent Wise Traditions conference in Minneapolis. Today, Lindsea explains to us the benefits of saturated fats and coconut oil in particular. You'll get the history of why some believe it's healthy and why others think it's not so much. The American Heart Association actually put out a statement calling coconut oil problematic, and this just happened in recent months. So we want you to find out, does it really increase bad cholesterol as they claim, or does it help reduce inflammation? What's the truth about it? Learn about why we are convinced that coconut oil should still be on your good list and in your kitchen cabinet. Before we get into the conversation, we want to acknowledge our sponsors. Wise Traditions is supported in part by Perfect Supplements. Perfect Supplements is a proud sponsor of the Wise Traditions Journal and conferences. Visit perfectsupplements.com for all of your favorite whole food and organic superfoods. And realmilk.com. Did you hear episode 104 about the real or raw milk movement? Check it out. Or just go to realmilk.com and find out why raw milk is real milk, nature's perfect food. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Lindsea.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you again.
You are the best. I don't mean to gush, but I really enjoyed meeting you this summer in California. And guess what? I hope to do some live shows out there in July, so stay tuned.
Yay, so excited.
Well, listen, I wanted to talk to you about coconut oil because it is all the rage, but it was maligned just a couple of months ago. What's going on? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? What's the deal with coconut oil?
So I think it's actually kind of funny because coconut oil is, for the alternative health world, this kind of very politically correct fat that we've been able to get to our clients in a sneaky way. And then all of a sudden, the general medical community was like, oh, we see what you're doing, and we've decided to put out a statement that this isn't okay. And so I feel like I'm speaking in tongues here. So basically, we as nutritionists love saturated fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's great for us. We need it. We need it to make healthy hormones and healthy brains and healthy joints and all the things. But it's so hard to convince our clients sometimes that butter and lard and tallow and duck fat are a part of a nutritious diet, right? Because they've been so, like you said, maligned for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
And then coconut oil came along, and it's saturated, but it's a plant fat.
Exactly.
And so everyone was like, oh, coconut oil, it's a plant fat. It's safe, right? So coconut oil was this politically correct saturated fat. So all of us nutritional practitioners and foodies and everyone were just kind of sitting over here like sneakily, like, batting our fingers like, we can actually get this amazing necessary saturated fat into the diets of so many more people that need it because it's politically correct.
Mm-hmm. We didn't think, let me just say, we didn't think that anyone was going to speak ill of it or say we were wrongheaded because it's so, like you said, so approved of by the general common wisdom of the medical community and whatnot.
Exactly, because the line in the sand for good fat and bad fat has been drawn between plant and animal.
You are so right. People are like, olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, palm oil, like that all sounds so healthy and good. And then regardless of what you think of the animal fats, you can be on this common ground kind of when you mention these plant-based oils.
Exactly. Whenever I talk about eating, that I eat a high-fat diet, people always look at me and they say, oh, yeah, like nuts and avocados and olive oil, because that's where we draw that line. Those are good, quote unquote, good fats, right? And so coconut oil is from a plant, right? So it very easily was brought into that side, that good fat side.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about fats, when I talk about fats with my clients, when we're looking at the wise traditions, the line that we draw in the sand is about sourcing and about quality.
Right.
And so, yeah, okay, butter from unhealthy cows is not good for you, but grass-fed butter is, just in the way that a um, beautifully cold pressed extra virgin olive oil is good for you, but the olive oil or the plant oil, like the canola oil, that's basically been oxidized and hydrogenized and who knows what's been done to it, that's not a good oil. And so our line is different. And coconut oil fell on the good side of everyone else's line and the good side of our line.
So what was it that happened this summer that suddenly I was seeing memes and graphics on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else saying coconut oil is trying to kill you? Like, wow, what were they saying? Who was putting out a statement against it?
So the American Heart Association basically just said, hey guys, we know that you're eating coconut oil like crazy, and we know that it's a plant oil, but also it's saturated, just FYI. So that was the big bomb that was dropped over the summer on everyone who was thinking that the line was plant is unsaturated and good, animal is saturated and bad, that, oh my gosh, this plant oil is saturated? What have I done? I have been eating all of this saturated fat for a year. Oh my goodness, all the things. I must be terribly unhealthy. What have I done? Yada yada. So that was the that was the uproar this
So
summer.
hold up. Are you telling me that people were eating or, using coconut oil, cooking with it, eating it, putting it on all over their skin, whatever, and they didn't know that it was saturated?
I do really think that the majority of people believed that as a plant oil, it was unsaturated and healthy for you.
Oh, and maybe the other piece is when they hear the word saturated, they think bad for you. So
Exactly.
maybe they just thought, okay, coconut is good for me. And to hear the obvious stated that it's a saturated fat alarmed them, right?
Yes.
And you
So
think the American Heart Association did this. What were their intentions? Why were they trying to scare people off of it then? If they were just kind of stating the facts, why is that bad?
I think that they were attempting to reassert their position that saturated fats are bad and unsaturated fats are good, and to recategorize coconut oil into the bad category because of its saturated fat content, and to wake people up to the fact that, hey, I know this is a plant oil and you've been using it and it's been very politically correct for the last few years, but hold up, it's not what you think it is.
So they were saying not only that, but we don't approve of it. Is that what they said? Did they go so far as to say we don't approve of it?
So there's been a lot of articles written based on their statement. They put out a new review study, and they put out, I think, a brief statement prior to that, but it was basically a redigging up of old studies vilifying saturated fat and just reasserting that saturated fats are bad and then lumping coconut oil in to the saturated fat category. And so it is, I think, just slightly comical because the reason that coconut oil became so big, I think, was because of us, the nutritionists in the natural health community that knew how deficient our society was in saturated fats and have been trying for years to convince people to eat grass-fed butter and to eat, bone marrows and to eat these good, healthy, saturated fats from healthy animals. And then finally we came across coconut oil and it worked, right? Everyone ate it. Everyone was healthy. There were studies on it from improving, cognition in Alzheimer's patients to improving blood sugar regulation to improving hormonal control, like everything. Everyone was all up on coconut oil. We were all about it. And so I think because it got so much play, the people who were trying to, keep the food industry under their thumb said, hey, we need to make sure that we keep this under control.
Yeah, it's like the American Heart Association is just throwing their weight around, trying to show that they're still in charge and they can still guide us. And as a matter of fact, I think their statement influenced a lot of people, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I was actually in a little mini conference a couple weeks ago, and the presenter mentioned something about coconut oil in a different context. And there were doctors around the table who were like, oh, wait, but we can't have coconut oil anymore, right? The ripple effect from that big ball dropping is definitely still being felt. And I think that it's hard to recover from, because we had made so much ground in talking about the benefits of coconut oil, and the benefits of coconut oil were the benefits of saturated fat. In my opinion, there's not a lot that you could gain from coconut oil that you couldn't gain from a high quality grass-fed butter, that you couldn't gain from a high quality pastured lard. It was just the fact that we were finally getting it into people, that they were noticing all these amazing changes. And so now we've kind of lost that ground again when people are reignited against saturated fat. And so we have to just kind of start over on that education process.
Coming up, find out about the studies that point to coconut oil's benefits. Lindsay explains what's available and what funds have to do with what gets studied. We pause now to recognize our sponsors. Perfect Supplements. Perfect Supplements is a proud sponsor of the Wise Traditions Conferences and was founded by a Weston A. Price Foundation local chapter leader. Perfect Supplements provides whole food and organic and grass-fed superfoods, including desiccated liver, collagen, spirulina, and chlorella. And save $5 at checkout with our coupon code WISE5. So go to perfectsupplements.com. And Real Milk, pasture-fed, unprocessed, full-fat, nature's perfect food. Find out about the benefits of real raw milk and where you can obtain it at realmilk.com. Well, speaking of that, do you have some studies that you can point our listeners to that show the efficacy and the good benefits of saturated fat in our diet?
I can do my best to put together a little reference sheet that you can kind of post along with this, this podcast. But the interesting thing is, and I actually ran into this in my own research at CSUN, was that this stuff isn't going to get funded. It's really, really difficult to propose a study, to get grant funds, and to say and publish something that is so opposing to the current accepted belief. It is so difficult. And so what we're seeing is that we have to go dig in at a much deeper level to some of these studies that are saying that saturated fat is bad, and realize specifically the food that they were eating, the methodology, what they were studying, the outcomes, in order to understand that these studies might not have been as sound science as they're being given credit for.
And some people have spent time digging into those studies and doing exactly what you said, right? Kind of showing that the science isn't really pointing in the direction that we thought.
Exactly. And so I'll be honest, I haven't dug into that review article yet, that the American Heart Association Presidential Advisory Study, that was just a big review article. I haven't been able to dig into all of that yet. But when we're looking at some of the references, they're from the 60s and 70s. So I'd imagine that most people have already done that digging.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll do our best to put in the show notes links to some reference sheet if you're able to develop one, or if we can find some resources, we will put them in the show notes, because we do want our listeners to be informed and really understand the heart of the matter. And going to that, since we were talking earlier about the American Heart Association being tied in with the food industry, I heard some people say that they believe it's because coconut oil has to be imported that the US food industry isn't making any money off of it because it taps into their corn oil and their soy oil. And you know what I'm saying? Like there's money is the bottom line, not our health. What do you think of that?
I think that is such a true and terrifying statement that our food politics is so much more about money than it is about health, period.
It is. It's alarming.
It is alarming. And I think that, and it's another thing that all of the, documentaries bring up all the time is that, wait a minute, why is there a Food and Drug Administration? Don't you think those should be separate?
Oh my gosh, that I had never thought of that before. That is awesome. That is so true. And why is there like a little pharmacy in your grocery store, right?
Like it is. It's maddening. And I think that all of this comes back to, we can point to all of this food politics and money back to, the 50s and 60s where all of this started. We wanted to find a use for this fancy hydrogenated fat that we sent our soldiers off with. And now there's no war anymore. And how are we going to convince people to eat this thing that we figured out how to produce? Let's vilify butter.
Right. Call it old fashioned and out of date.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So this is not new what is being done to coconut oil. It's just, sorry, coconut oil, you've now joined the ranks of butter and lard. And we still love you, but welcome to, the bullied table.
Wow. I can just picture a little graphic on Instagram with all those little oils just, kind of crying. But we're going to hold on to them, right? I mean, are you able to persuade the clients that you see as an NTP to not be afraid of it? Are you able to kind of point to some benefits? They might even experience those benefits themselves, your clients, correct?
Absolutely. And I think that the two biggest things that I use as my, quote unquote evidence without, presenting a binder worth of research studies is one, this is what people have been eating for centuries, right? It's only the newfangled stuff that needs the science to prove it. The butter, the lard, the tallow, these more animal type fats have been around since we were eating animals. So since forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just always what we've done. And in traditional cultures, if something you were eating wasn't making you healthy, you would stop eating it.
Mm-hmm.
Period. So that's the one thing is, hey, let's just okay, take the science out of it. What were our ancestors doing? Right? Just that very simple fact is very illuminating for most people. And most people have the experience of having a grandma making a pie crust with lard, or, waking up in the morning and cooking eggs in the bacon fat.
Mm-hmm.
That was the way before Crisco took over for lard and before margarine took over for butter. So that's one of the main things that we'll talk about is just, hey, we call it wise traditions for a reason, right? There's wisdom in these ancestral traditions. And then the other thing is, okay, sure. We don't like saturated fat. Okay. We don't like saturated fat because it causes heart attacks, right? And high cholesterol, and that's our problem with it. Well, as a country, we eliminated saturated fat in the 60s. And since then, our rates of heart disease have only increased. So maybe it's time to rethink our opinion on saturated fat. And I think that those two facts alone, and those two, kind of thought experiments alone are enough to open people's minds to the possibility that there might be something to everything that I'm saying about all of these saturated fats.
You're so right. And I'm thinking of Dave Asprey, who was in the mountains in the Middle East or something, when he came across this concept of putting fat in the coffee or tea. It's because he came across some people, correct me if I'm wrong, who were putting like yak butter in their tea. And he suddenly had an aha moment that, oh yeah, natural fats are good for you, and let's come up with this. And now he's got this whole stream of supplements and, people who are crazed about it because why? They're feeling better than when they were putting their non-dairy creamer in their coffee, right?
Absolutely. And I had a friend who couldn't drink her coffee without tons of sugar. And I challenged her to try this, crazy thing about putting butter in your coffee a couple years ago. And she came back, she, called me that morning and said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't need to put any sugar in my coffee. This tastes so good." And yeah, when we can switch people back to eating more fat than sugar, that's where we need to go. Because when we took fat out of our diet in the 60s, what did we replace it with? Sugar.
Sugar. Mm-hmm.
So we need to make that readjustment in our ratios of nutrients.
So as we work on those ratios, Lindsay, is there such a thing as too much fat, too much coconut oil, too much butter in our diets?
This is a really, really good question, and one that I get challenged with daily with my clients, because they're still so incredulous that this fat could be good for them, that they want to feel like they're still towing some kind of line or within some kind of boundary of healthy, and there's just this disbelief that an unlimited amount of fat would be appropriate. And now I will say that I have been a little bit more conservative lately after I had someone who was looking to lose weight achieve her weight loss goal. And then, I was trying to, again, convince her that she could eat the butter that she wanted to and all of this. And she came back 2 weeks later and had gained some weight, and she blamed it on the butter. And I was like, well, okay, I don't really feel like that can be true. And then we just find out that she is literally snacking on spoonfuls of butter all day long. And so what I say to the question of, is there an upper limit on our fats, is yes, but it is very personal. And the way I ask people to measure that is based on hunger. So if you were really hungry and you snacked on that little bite of butter, not a problem, right? But she was doing it because it tasted good, not because she was hungry.
Right.
Which I totally forgive her for, because butter is amazing. So basically, fat is the macronutrient that tells our body that we're full. So if you're truly listening to your body, it's very, very difficult to overeat fat, because you will get a signal very strongly that you are full.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We could go eat, I don't know, cups and cups and cups of steamed broccoli. But the second you cook your broccoli in butter, you're like, oh, maybe a cup and a half of it is enough.
Exactly. Yeah, that's been my experience too. I think you're right. I think there is a kind of a limit. We need to listen to our bodies to know where that limit is. Hey, I have a penultimate question for you here before we begin to wrap up. What about the whole eat local thing? Like, there are no coconuts where I live. Should I be, eating coconut oil when it's not local?
I think that this goes back to the fact that the reason coconut oil was popular is because it was a plant oil, and the reason it was healthy for you was because it was saturated. So if we want to get the benefits of coconut oil and eat local grass-fed butter. Mm. So we don't necessarily need to eat this coconut oil from the far reaches of the tropics. We can get our great quality saturated fat with the medium chain triglycerides from butter.
Mm-hmm. It's more like the coconut oil can fill in the gaps if you live in the Midwest somewhere, or you're in a country or in a place, a region where these good quality butters and fats aren't available from animal sources. So coconut oil could fill in the gaps, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I love coconut oil, so I'm really excited to still keep eating it, even though I live in DC. But anyway, I did want to ask you, Lindsay, before we wrap up, if the listener could do only one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Don't be afraid of fats.
Pure and simple.
I really feel like people are still so afraid of fat, and the fact that this statement over the summer was put out to again reignite that fear, and it worked, is proof that people are still, even the ones who are eating the fats, still have this very tenuous faith in it. So I would urge people to really not be afraid of it, and to really go back and really think hard about what their grandma and great grandma were making for breakfast, and really look at some of the research that we can provide, and really feel in your own heart and your own health about how much better you feel and how much better everything tastes when you're using the real food and the real butter and the real fats that our bodies are meant to thrive on.
That's exactly right. And I'm just thinking now of Sally's book. She's written a book called Nourishing Fats. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And I know there are articles from the Weston A. Price Foundation's Wise Traditions Journal that also cover this subject. So we'll have all kinds of resources in the show notes. And you have been a tremendous resource today. So thank you so much, Lindsay.
Thank you so much.
My guest today was Lindsea Willon. To connect with Lindsay, go to biodynamicwellness.com. Or for an overview of today's discussion and links to resources, including the reference sheet that Lindsay promised, go to westonaprice.org, click on the tab for blogs and podcasts, and find the show notes for episode 106. Hey, and a big thank you to Podcast Village. I am your biggest fan. Charlie Burney and his team are amazing. They are great at what they do, pros when it comes to training, producing, and promoting podcasts. Check them out at podcastvillage.com. And special thanks to editor Sarah Fernandez and the team of interns who help us with the show. Cynthia Castro Cohen Enriquez, Joy de los Santos, Alexma Alvarado, Kristen Files, and Elisa Canty, as well as Lily Hanft. Thanks also to Amy Marvin for her help transcribing episodes. Hey, and don't forget to connect with me at Holistic Hilda on Twitter, at Holistic_Hilda on Instagram. I want to connect with you, really, and get your feedback on these episodes, and really on any matter pertaining to podcasting and health and wellness. So thank you so much, and keep on listening.
Have you been enjoying these podcasts? Have you benefited from them or from the resources on the website or local chapter meetings? If so, please become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's only $25 for students and seniors and $40 for a general membership. Your contribution is critical for the continued work of the foundation. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.